Thank you, Richard, for sharing. And it's great to be together. Just a little thing. We noticed with Richard this morning that we both came out with a white shirt. I think it's kind of a spring, the sun. It's a kind of pre-summer feeling. It's not that we're going to become a Mormon church, so that's right. As Richard said, we're starting a new series, and the truth is I'm very encouraged by this series. I'm really looking forward to it. And it's all about rebuilding. And I'd like us to think about our journey the last 12 months. How has it been? How has it truly been? What have we lost? What was there before and isn't anymore? Someone we love, a job, an opportunity, a relationship. What has been broken or affected by this international long storm? Dreams, friendships, maybe your relationship with God. And there's a process we go through when we mourn, and it's a necessary and healthy process, yet it's also horrible and we want to avoid it. And the Kubler-Ross grief cycle says that we go through something like this. We start with a sense of shock and denial. This is obviously when we're grieving about the death of someone we love. But there's a kind of sense of shock and denial, kind of avoidance, confusion, fear, numbness, a kind of sense of not really understanding what's happening. And then we get into a stage of anger and frustration, anxiety, even shame. And then it tends to move into depression and detachment. We feel overwhelmed and the sense of helplessness, a lack of energy. And then we start a process of dialogue and bargaining. We start reaching out. We start to have a desire to tell the story. And we start struggling to find meaning again. And then we go into a phase of acceptance and exploring the options. What's next thing, a new plan? And then we return again to a meaningful life where we feel empowered and secure and our self-esteem rises again. And we again have a sense of meaning. And in some ways, what we went through has been a lot of loss and grief. And I would suggest that we are, in a way, kind of personally and as a community, as a world even, going through a grieving process. But also we are in a process of recovery and rebuilding. So it might be one of these stages, or you're actually literally grieving from someone you lost, or you're grieving for the sense of normality or the loss of a job or a relationship. But we all are at a different stage in this process, and some might feel that their life hasn't been affected at all. But the truth is we are going through these things, most of us, and the truth is stages aren't kind of one after the other, kind of a straight line. It's actually much more of an overlap and a mixture, and we go through different things, and it's a bit of a roller coaster of emotions. And we want to go, in a way, as a church, in the next 5 weeks, go through this process together. We want to lament together today. We want to learn, see what we've learned, but we also want to look at the future with hope and expectation. We want to search for God and see what He has for us for the next kind of season of the church. So let's have a look at the Psalm. And I love that we have Psalms. I just love the fact that we have Psalms. Isn't it amazing that the Word of God, the Holy Scripture of a perfect God also reflects our humanity and our imperfections, our roller coaster of emotions in a great way, and especially in the Psalms. And I'd like to think of us looking at the Psalm as a whole, because a lot of Psalms tend to have a first bit, which is the person's kind of really angry or frustrated or depressed, but then they end up with a time of praise. And sometimes we think that kind of it's a very quick journey where kind of the psalmist is, oh, he's really angry at God, and after 5 minutes of prayer, he then ends up kind of happy clappy, all is good. And actually, the Psalms are to be read as a whole, even though it ends with a kind of more positive bit. In a way, it's to be a whole thing together. And it's not that we kind of start with the complaining in a way, and we end up with the lovely bits. It's that we hold both things together in a kind of tension where we hold what we find really difficult about life and even questioning God, but we hold in tension as well the kind of trust and love we have in God. So this psalm, just the last two verses say, "But I trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation. I will sing the Lord's praise, for he has been good to me." And it's a lovely kind of response of praise and trust in God. But the first bit, it's really harsh. If you read the first two verses, it says, "How long, Lord, will you forget me forever?" Saying, you've forgotten me. How long will you hide your face from me? You've left me by myself. How long must I wrestle with my thoughts, and day after day, and this is day after day, have sorrow in my heart? How long will my enemy triumph over me? And I think I just love that this is in the Bible, because he complains and he worships at the same time. He holds those two things together in a beautiful kind of harmony. And I think that's something that we need to embrace as well, to realize that the Bible gives us permission to be sad and depressed and angry at God. And it also gives us permission to kind of complain whilst we kind of also love him, whilst we also trust in him, while we also say, you are amazing, God, but I just don't understand this. So it's lovely how this psalmist is both worshipping and yet he is depressed. But we are mad. Like, we know no matter what, we're going to continue loving them, but we're angry at something. It's a bit like at home when I get angry at my wife, and she probably gets more opportunities to get angry at me than I at her. But I know that I love her. I know that regardless of what's happened, we're going to live our lives together, that I wouldn't change that for anything. But I'm still annoyed and I'm still frustrated. And I still need to chat something through. So I love the permission we get from God to be angry at him. And actually, that's in a way frees us from any guilt or shame about those feelings. And I think we really need to be serious and honest about this, that sometimes we feel ashamed and we ask for forgiveness for being angry at God. And actually, there's permission to have those feelings. It's all right. It's okay to have them, because we are holding those things whilst also choosing to trust and worship him. So I'd like us today to kind of try and acknowledge our feelings from the last 12 months, but it might be more than that as well. Our frustrations with life and with God, maybe to cry and to lament, to accept that we might have those feelings, that for some it will be deeper than others, but a lot has happened in this last year and we've lost a lot, where we kind of realize it or not. I think just as a church community, we've lost the sense of being a family in many ways, the possibility of singing together, of seeing each other each week and catching up. Not only those kind of who are closer, but the people we tend to only see on Sundays. And we felt that loss of community. We've also all missed contact with family members or friends, people we love. We missed the warmth of a hug or a deep in-person conversation. We missed seeing each other, eating together, just doing stuff together. And it has been lonely. It has been distant. It has been too detached and too cold. So I think there's also this loss of affection that we've all gone through. And in many ways, we've all lost something personally as well. It might be a deeper relationship with God. It might be a job. It might be someone we love that we literally lost, and the kind of opportunity of spending more time with them in those last days, the opportunity of spending more time with people we love. Sometimes some people might have lost hope or a future. And the third thing is kind of this loss of opportunity, of the things we missed the last year and the opportunities which might have a change for the future. So it hurts to lose all these things. It does really hurt. It creates confusion, anger, frustration, anxiety, depression, helplessness. And we need to acknowledge this in us and in others. But it also creates, as we saw in the process, a hunger to tell our story, to share what we've gone through, to reach out, to find meaning again, to explore options, to see what's a new thing coming. to accept the reality and to feel empowered again, to return to a meaningful life with others together. So the psalm doesn't really share a solution to the problem. It doesn't have a kind of easy formula, well, now do this. It actually just holds in tensions our feelings, which are valid and okay, the kind of hurt we have, but also the love and passion we have for God. It holds both things together without saying exactly how we should deal with this or just live with this tension. It's not a kind of either or. You either kind of have these bad feelings or you trust God. It's both things together. We are hurt, but we know that there is hope, that at some point we will discover meaning again and the sense of excitement with our life, with church life, with what God is doing. So I'd like to invite Richard and Jane now to share maybe how do you deal with God when you are frustrated or angry, when you're sad? How do you come to him in prayer? And Jane, maybe would you like to start?
Yeah, I've been thinking quite a bit about this. I think what I do is, first of all, acknowledge that it's all right to be angry with God. It's okay to tell him that I'm frustrated about something. And of course, it's not my fault. It's definitely someone else's fault. And I take that to God. But what I do is I go to a place where I've met God before. So maybe St. Giles Churchyard. I have a particular bench there that I like to go and sit on because it reminds me that God is there. And despite my frustration, I can be with him.
Thank you, Jane. Richard?
Thank you. Building on what Jane said, I've learned over the years not to bottle it up, but to let God have it with both barrels. So that actually is naming it and saying, Lord, I am really hacked off by, and to actually communicate that in prayer. From time to time, I write it down, and I find that quite helpful to write it down. And then at other times, as Jane says, go to a place that I know that I can just be still and be honest with God, and also share it with others. I mean, my wife is very understanding and long-suffering, or close friends.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you both. I think we all do kind of quite similar things. I tend to do the same thing. I usually just kind of continue with my prayer life, and in the time where I journal or where I speak more, I'll share my frustrations. If it's something that I'm kind of snapping at, more reactive, I tend to probably go for a walk, which gives me a bit more space and actually helps me kind of concentrate on something different for a while, walk, and then kind of start expressing a bit more. I think we all find ways to do it, but I think the main thing is to actually to not bottle it up, as Richard was saying, and actually bring it out in prayer and share it and be open, because it's such a healing process. I just wanted to share something I kind of came across this week, just out of chance, was that I heard again the story from, you remember the movie Alive? A lot of you might remember it. It's the story of this plane crash in the Andes. That's a plane going from Uruguay with some rugby players going to Chile to play rugby, and the plane crashed, and a lot of people died and some survived, and they had to survive in the mountain. I was kind of re-engaging with the story, which I kind of obviously heard years and years ago, and I started looking into kind of what they felt and what they went through, and in a way obviously connected with this kind of coming out of the valley, which we are talking about today. As you know, there were some people who were kind of full of hope and kind of much more positive, and some were really depressed and couldn't react. And they were hearing in the radio after, I can't remember, something like 40 days, that they were going to stop the search and they weren't going to look for them anymore, and therefore their hope was kind of lost. And two of them decided to kind of walk out and try and see if they could find a way out of this, because they knew that they couldn't depend on someone else. And we all know the end of the story. They got somewhere and they were rescued. But as I was looking at their story, I was kind of reflecting, there are some similarities. Obviously, it's a completely different dimension to what we're living through today. There's kind of that sense of loss, but that also sense of, well, it's something we we can do about it. So I'm going to just share 3 quotes from Nando Barrado, who's the kind of the main character in the movie. He's Ethan Hawke, if you've seen the movie, and he shares a few things which I find fascinating. And he says, even here, this is part of the book, even as we suffer, life is still worth living. Even in the midst of the kind of hardest time in his life, he said life is still worth living. The other thing he had said, which I find really kind of engaging for us today, he says, we understood intuitively that no one in this awful place could be judged by the standards of the ordinary world. And I think that's a degree of kindness towards ourselves and others we need to have in kind of this world crisis. And the last thing is, there's so much hope in this last phrase. He said, I would walk until I had walked all the life out of me. And when I fell, I would die that much closer to home. His sense of this, there's something kind of more worth living for was so big that he said, I'll just walk, and if I die in the way, I'll die, but I'll just continue. And I think the reflection on them or on their situation can be a reflection on our situation today, and just be kind to ourselves, just know that there is hope, that there is more to life, that God is there. And as we hold these 2 tensions together, the kind of wanting to love and trust God, and also knowing that we're going through stuff, difficult stuff, I think we just need to acknowledge that. And therefore my kind of end bit would be just to say these 2 things. It's that we are in an extremely difficult situation, some harder than others, and the recovery will take long sometimes. The rebuilding might take longer than we'd like. But the 2 things I take from this passage is that it's okay to hold whatever hardship, anxiety, fears, depression, frustration, anger at God that we have, whilst also recognizing that we trust him and that we want to love and worship him. And I think that the challenge that I'd like to leave with us is to actually be honest with God, to actually do what we were all talking about that we do when we're struggling, to actually say, okay, this week I'm going to spend an hour maybe with God where I'm going to write down what are my frustrations, what are things I'm finding difficult, what are things I'm really hurting inside, and just bring them to God and be honest and be transparent, because I think it's such a healing process in our relationship with him, but also for us individually. So my challenge is spend some time this week writing down, thinking things through, praying things through with God, and saying, these are all of the things that actually I'm holding on this hand while I still trust you. These are things that are really hurting, and I just want to share them with you. I just want to be open with you, God. So let's just pause and pray for a while, and then we'll have a time of worship.